We grow when we give.
We grow when we give.
We grow when we give.
Nosotros crecemos cuando damos.
We grow when we give.
与えるとき成長する。
We grow when we give.
Welcome to ROG Return on Generosity, a podcast celebrating generosity at work. Not financial giving, giving valuable time, alternative perspectives, and genuine collaboration. Welcome back to ROG Return on Generosity podcast. I'm your host, Shannon Cassidy. And today we're diving into a conversation about leadership, intentional culture, and transforming an industry from the inside out with two incredible guests from C3, a company that's challenging the norms of the insurance industry by putting people, culture, and relationships first. Jamie Reid is chairman of the board and leads C3's complex comp division. He brings decades of experience in risk management, underwriting, and claims, helping mature businesses protect themselves from unexpected loss. Joining him is Gabe Erle, president of C3, with a background in international finance and a talent for crafting sophisticated insurance strategies. Gabe's leadership is all about clarity, creativity, and connection. Together, Jamie and Gabe are building something special at C3, a company rooted in generosity, authenticity, and service. They're not just about disrupting insurance, they're about redefining how business can be done with heart. What I appreciate most about both of you, Jamie and Gabe, is your collaboration. And I'm so grateful to have you on the show today. Welcome to ROG.
Thanks for having us. Wow, you just got us fired up about ourselves, I think.
So why don't we hear a little bit about your background? We'll start with you, Jamie. Tell us where you were born, a little bit about how you got to where you are today.
Gabe always hates how I talk about myself, but I'm born in Kansas City, and kind of came up in a blue collar family. Great upbringing. My parents actually live here in San Diego now, which is awesome. And I went to school. This is the part he doesn't like. I went to Central Missouri State University, but I doubled down and have a degree in safety, which back when I went there was like hard hats and safety glasses. And however, went to work for a really good construction company that built power plants, refineries, etc. And we had self-insured programs. So I ended up managing projects for Southern Energy, Conoco, Lockheed Martin, where we self-insured them. And so I got this just bird's eye view as a buyer, what insurance looked like before being recruited into the insurance industry, where probably through boredom, I kind of just moved with an insurance company through all the different channels of what they do as an insurance company before dragging my wife to Kansas City. She's Filipino. I think she was the first one ever to move to Missouri. And it was like, I think she's going back to California with or without me. So, I'd rather go with her. And at that time, decided to become a broker and an insurance broker. And that's when I met up with Gabe. And we worked for about 10 years together before he came up with the idea of C3, and we collaborated on it and stood the thing up in 2017.
Amazing. Thank you so much. That's great. How about you, Gabe?
Not quite as exciting. I was born in Fairfield, California, which is Travis Air Force Base. My father flew in the Air Force. So we actually, as kids, we moved every 3 to 4 years, which I think ended up serving me with, you mentioned connection, with being able to connect with people, because I always had to figure out how to meet new people and find a way to belong. So that was my father's first career. And then I went to school, and actually went to school in Missouri, not too far from where Jamie went to school, just coincidentally, at Washington University. And then after that, I worked for IBM Global Services on the finance side, and spent a little time in St. Louis, and then transferred after I got married and moved to their headquarters in Europe in Paris. So spent about 2.5 years in Paris. And then something that I never wanted to do was get involved in insurance. That didn't sound sexy at all. But that was my father's second career. And he actually came out to Paris and convinced me to come try it out. and that's how I got into this business.
No kidding.
He mentored me and taught me insurance.
Amazing. So did you start in insurance in France
No,
or
we
you
moved
moved
back.
back? Okay.
Actually, started in Sacramento, California.
Okay. Oh,
That's where he was at.
excellent. And how many years ago was that roughly?
So that was 2003.
19.
Okay.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. Long time ago.
Yeah,
Okay. And both of you are dads. Tell me a little bit about your families.
I have 4 kids. My oldest is going to be a junior in university. She's
Mhm.
21. Then I have a son who's 17 and is going to be a senior in high school. And then I have a daughter who's 14 who's going to be a freshman in high school. And then my youngest son, Danny, who's going to be going into 7th grade. He's 12.
Oh, wow. Milestone years.
Well, footnote, Gabe's also highly competitive. And had I had 4 kids, he'd have 5. Um,
That's true.
but I got snipped after 3. And so after he got his 4th to beat me, I drove him to the snip doctor and was like, hey, at some point we've got to work on business here. So I have a 17-year-old daughter who'll be a senior in high school, and then 12 and 14-year-old boys that are in 8th and 9th grade are about to start those. So
Wow. Those
yeah,
are
it's fun.
really important years as dads. So tell us the C3 origin story. How did C3 come to be?
Well, I mentioned earlier, Gabe was kind of the brainchild of it. Came to me and was like, "We got to go start this thing." And the reason I think at the time, and Gabe, tell me if I'm wrong here, but he said that was we were at a shop where we're independent contractors, so kind of like a realtors are at Berkshire Hathaway or Coldwell Banker or something like that. And we hit a glass ceiling. Like we had done as well as we could in an organization structured the way it was. Um, but it would be hard to grow beyond where we were. It didn't have the resources and sophistication for the type of mature clients we deal with. And
He's saying it nicely. It was kind of the dinosaur of insurance agencies. We were
Okay.
using technology that was 20 years old back then. Like we were back in 2000s, we were on Novell system, and we,
Mhm.
if you think of office space, with the cubicles, everybody was sitting in one of those.
Mhm.
So it was very like old school. Somebody the wife of the owner would walk around and make sure there wasn't anything sitting on the desks, that everything
Uh,
looked neat. So it was it was an environment where, which was probably fairly typical of insurance agencies across the
Probably.
country,
Mhm.
but it was something that we felt like we had to reimagine.
well,
Mhm.
not just typical. I mean, it was the standard. If for the sports people out there, the San Diego Padres are an organization that showcase the personalities of the players. And so it's not taking, a round peg and jamming it into a square hole. Conversely, and there's no right or wrong. Both can be great, but the New York Yankees, your facial hair has to meet a certain look, your haircut has to be a certain way. You fit a profile within their system. And so
Mhm.
just the way those two organizations operate are totally different. And so when Gabe and I were trying to figure out, we didn't have millions of dollars to start an agency. We had our 2 books of business and about 20 people who supported us. A couple of other producers came with us. We had to figure out how would we fund this thing.
Mhm.
We grew from 3.5 million in revenue to 30 some million now, from 20 some people to about 150. And it was like, what's our strategy?
Mm.
And so not having the deep pockets that our big competitors in the same space going after, medium to large businesses have, we landed on the concept of culture that, like Gabe was talking about, most of the firms that operated, there was not an identity for the people. It was an autocratic, top down.
Mhm.
Um, and there wasn't a lot of diversity and challenging status quo and things like that. And so literally our differentiator and go-to-market plan, this is almost sad at, 10 years ago, what it was like. has just fueled us to showcase people bringing their own personalities and being who they are, as our business model has helped us just excel to the top.
Yeah, our industry is kind of known as male, pale, and stale. And so we talk about, changing that perspective and changing that view, because it is an industry that, and it's kind of secretly, it's really all about relationships and creating trust and connecting. But people see it as this, very, salesy, something that you never want to hear about as insurance. It's just a cost. So, kind of changing that perspective was part of it, but also really going back to the people. How do we really attract the best people, the best talent to this industry? Because that will, really change, our ability to grow and to get to where we want to be.
So it sounds like you're really grounded in core values. I know that's really a critical component to C3. Can you tell me more about your core values and how they came to be?
Sure. Well, just the three C's are part of our core values, which is creativity, collaboration, and care. And we always end with the care part. It's really about, how we care for each other as, as team members and colleagues, how we care for our clients, and how we care for the community. And it's something that obviously we talk about a lot, but it's really, talk is interesting, but it's really, how we demonstrate it with each other.
How do you do
Yeah,
that? What are the ways that you clarify what does that mean,
I think
for each
I
of the
think
three?
I think these things are most easily measured in tough times. Like when everything's going well, or we're having parties, we're writing big deals, like that's easy for any organization to perform at a high level or have good culture and human interaction. It's really during the challenging times that culture gets defined. And so I think when you have conflict in relationships or outcomes or whatever it may be, you know, getting a culture established where you're really looking at intent first, and then trying to understand communications and other things, but treating each other through conflict, even when we have had to separate with people. We separated with somebody who had equity and was a leader of our organization, where we allowed that person to stay for up to 6 months, find another job after we had notified them that we're going to part ways, to do it in a humane way. And so I think in those tough times, that's really where you get to define it. And everybody in the organization watches, us and the other leaders in the company, how we behave in those moments matter the most.
And it happens, with each other, but also with our clients. If there's a situation where, whether there's a coverage gap, or there's a issue with their business, it's how we show up, even if it's going to cost us, because those are also areas to really show who we are. And then, I think it's easier to say, hey, that's not our fault. But it's accountability, is a big aspect of care. It's like, it's how you show up, shows how much how much you care about what we're doing and why we're doing it.
For sure. Can you think of an example of a tough time that required you to lean on your values and say, this is a chance for us to really lean into creativity or collaboration or care, or maybe all three?
I mean, I just mentioned the coverage issue. We've had those where we've, you know, um, not only showed up to where there was, to our clients in a crisis, but also, written checks out of our pocket because we felt it was the right thing to do. Um, so that's an example. I think also when, you have, sometimes we'll have, you know, a team member who's really underperforming, and, it's consistent underperformance, and we'll, sit down and really address it head on and sit and just try to figure out what's happening with them, because it's a change to how they were before. And what we found is that typically it's something happening in their personal life.
Yeah.
And we've where we've really said, hey, how do we support you personally, to get you through that, so you can come back here and be able to support your family. So go ahead, Jamie. Wanted to add to that.
Yeah, I mean, you kind of prime me up a little bit there talking about that because I feel like a couple things. One is that there's a book on it. I can't remember the title, but not being afraid to have the difficult conversations. When we see these things, we try to address it as quickly and immediately as possible, because not addressing concerns with people is also it's condoning certain other things that other people are picking up on, and that can erode relationships and culture as well. So when we recognize something, we want to get in and have the tough conversation as quickly as possible, with a perspective coming from caring, and how we address it. But I mean, we've had, you have 100 and some employees. You have a lot of you own everything about their life. They bring that personal life to work, and as much as like the state of California can make it difficult to separate work life and personal, that's not reality. And so, I mean, we've had people who have substance abuse issues or different things like that, where we've had to sit down and say, hey, we will co-invest with you in your health, and we have to call in our labor attorneys and say, how do we manage this situation where we definitively know something in their personal life is having significant impact on their work life, and we can't address one without the other. And so we need counsel first, but as soon as we know about it, we address, and we try to co-invest in those things with them to the extent that it's legally and morally able to do so, and create resolution that works for everybody.
That's incredible.
And we're also really proud of, we invest in personal life coaching for some of our people that are interested in engaging in it. We'll offer it, because what we realize is that, really supporting, people through whatever they're going through, their hard times or their patterns or stuff that they brought with them. And not only, can really change their whole life and change their family life, but it supports the business as well. So it's a win-win.
But it must be working, and you're seeing the benefit and people appreciate it. So you're like, let's keep it going. And it's really putting your values to the test. Like you said, like when, how do you know what a company really cares about? It's like, where do they focus their time, attention, and resources? And yours is focused on people and, not just your clients, but your internal, family, your team that you're supporting. And you've said before, not in this conversation, but that generosity isn't just a feel good concept. It's a powerful business strategy. So how do you see generosity as a powerful business strategy?
I think, the selfishly, it does create loyalty. When people feel that they're, being poured into and they're being supported, then they perform better. They want to support back. They want to do better.
Yeah.
So there is it's like, there's always it does feel uncomfortable that, this idea of generosity for the sake of generosity versus you're getting a payback. But I think in any giving, there's a payoff. So you just can't get around that. It's not always about the immediate payback, right? Because that's where you start to lose that generosity. If you're looking for this tit for tat experience, it's really about, if you're just giving for the sake of supporting and helping somebody grow or helping the organization grow, that it will, the idea is that it will come back, and at one point. We don't know how it will, but it's just because it's the right thing to do.
Like even just the examples you've shared already, where you're separating with someone, but you do it in such a dignified way and a gracious way to make sure that they're well. And then the employee or employees on substance abuse, that you connect with them, you learn about them. You don't just say, give them a negative performance review. You say, I wonder what's going on with them. That's that curiosity that you talked about, the creativity. And then you're investing in them to say, how can we make you well? And even if they depart from C3, you've done right by them. And that feels good, right? Which we could call it selfish, but I think it's just knowing that you're a contributor to the bigger, the greater good. And that's like payoff enough. What were you going to say, Jamie?
I actually was going to say something very aligned with what Gabe said, shockingly, but as he spoke, like sort of a tangent. It's not generosity. Maybe it's more like vulnerability. When you talk about managing between personal lives and work lives, we also have to demonstrate that, and that helps a lot break down barriers. If you're stoic and people don't have access to that, it changes the relationship. And an example, I went to Ukraine with a group that Gabe and I are heavily involved with during the war. And when I came back, I had 100 different individual conversations about what happened with people within our organization. Well, Gabe's brother has family in Israel. He studied Middle East religious studies as his major in college. I don't know if I got that exactly right, but he's very close to what's happening there. So when that Hamas invasion occurred, I went to Gibb and I was like, hey, why don't we have a town hall? Because what's going to happen is if we don't, you're going to have 100 individual conversations. Like, let's just talk about it. And so I forget exactly how so we invited, and 90% of the team showed up because we did it within like a week of it happening. And the whole world was like, what's going on right now? So through that organization, we get a lot of access to active military and intelligence officers, things like that, that you can't consume on the news. And so I interviewed Gabe and I started the conversation. I think I said something like, okay, we're going to try not to go down rabbit holes on religion and, this, that, and politics, all of it. And one of the guys are like, isn't this all about that? We're like, yeah, that's how, we're going to try to thread a tough needle here. But we had like an amazing, healthy conversation. Mm-hmm. I don't think a lot of that gets brought into work. And so it's not just about what they're doing. It has to be 360 degrees of openness.
Yeah. And I think that we're, especially as leaders, if we talk about our own vulnerabilities, what we're going through, and it really helps. Like, just actually this morning I was talking about it, imposter syndrome and trusting yourself and trusting myself, and, a conversation with an employee, with a team member. And, that kind of really resonated with that person. And it's just part of, like, I think part of growing, growing in a business and in life.
Yeah. And I think being vulnerable is an act of generosity because you're putting yourself in an uncomfortable position. You're exposing yourself, some of your insecurities or your true feelings or your concerns or whatever it is, to another person, which is not easy to do. So it's just easier to cover that up and put on the position or the pose of confidence. So I think that's a generous thing to do. And then you're more relatable, which is also generosity, right? Because you're like connecting with someone, you're collaborating on a real level, and then they can be more honest with you. And you don't always get reciprocal vulnerability, but you can lead by example by showing them like this is how you're choosing to lead, and that you're being more authentic and transparent with them. What would 100%. You say to people who see vulnerability as a weakness?
I mean, if you have to have a strong sense of self to be willing to be vulnerable. So I think our life coach would say, if you're not willing to be there, there's probably things for you to focus on and, for you to resolve within yourself to get to a place to where it becomes more comfortable. Now, that said, that's not to judge somebody who's not there. It could be a journey for that person, and exposure could be a part of that journey. So I think it depends on where somebody's at in their own life journey.
Yeah, I go back to the try it, because that's where you can find proof. Mm-hmm. Once you try it and you find proof that it actually isn't a weakness, it's a strength, where it helps you connect, it helps you get insight. It helps you learn more too, because you're sharing something that somebody else might be able to connect with, and then they can share it
Mm-hmm.
uh, and then work through it. So
I was
Yeah.
waiting for you. I was trying to tee you up for your Byron Katie slash Tammy Earle question. You know which one I'm saying?
no.
Is it true?
Oh yeah. Is it really true?
Is it
Yeah.
really
No,
true?
that's what that's the question back is, is it really true? Is it really a weakness? Is that really
Yeah.
true?
Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
yeah.
What's
She's
the background context to that?
well, we were with that same organization. It's called Alder. It's a bit of a leadership organization that tries to make a difference in the world. Let's phrase it that way. They had Byron Katie, who I didn't know. I don't know. She's like 80 years old or something. And she's coming to talk to us at an event. And Gabe brought his wife Tammy. Was like, Tammy, who has studied her, is like just over the moon to listen to this lady speak. And I was like, oh, okay. Like, I guess I'll show up, And one of the takeaways was, in a conversation like this, she was challenging people to just pause and say, is it really true? Whatever thoughts you have in your own head, you have to ask yourself, is that true? Or is that a story made up in your own head? And by challenging yourself that way, maybe you arrive at a different place, and it's just something that's marinating in there.
Yep.
And Byron Katie is just famous for really challenging, like could the opposite be true?
Mm-hmm.
Of what you think is true.
That's so important to do, because I think even return on generosity is similar in that, you think if you give what you have less. But we know that when you give what you have exponentially more. And it's one of those, just try it, like you're saying, right? Because it's counterintuitive. But it's like, in order for you to really experience joy, you have to give, and you've got to give all out, and then just enjoy your quality of life from that point forward. And that doesn't just mean like you're going to have material things. It means you're going to have joy. So it's like a trust me, try it, right? So I think vulnerability is the same type of thing. Plus, it's just easier, right? I mean, you don't have to be so like clenching on and
you touched
holding on to things, and that scarcity mentality.
you touched on
Yeah.
really the idea of abundance versus scarcity, and it's really about how you choose to live your life. And that you mentioned that idea that giving is really is from an abundant place, versus this idea that there's this finite amount of giving you can do, or of resource that you have, or and that's what really you want to challenge all the time is that idea that there is this finite amount. There isn't. It's abundant.
And so your vision at C3 is to create peace of mind. Tell us more about that.
Well, that's a client-facing statement, for the external world. So, there's different language you're using if you're talking external versus internal.
Mm-hmm.
Although
Sure.
a lot of our social media that people don't understand is we're not actually talking to the external world. We train our teams in orientation that we're going to speak to you on social media. It's an internal conversation. An example would be when we have a new baby, we're going to send a BC email. So 100 and some people don't respond to a CC 1,000 times. And we're going to say, hey, go celebrate this event on social media where we've announced it. And we're talking to our own teams, and the rest of the world can watch if they want, or they could step in the living room and participate in the conversation. Peace of mind is an external client facing. And, if you take what most of our businesses is for business owners, at the best case scenario, they're spending, most of our clients, tens or hundreds millions of dollars on insurance, and they get nothing in return. They never file a claim. It's just an expense on a balance sheet. Mm-hmm. And so it's like, how do we be more than just a commoditized cost that if something bad happens, you file a claim? And so really what we're trying to do is look at business risk. Insurance is just one way to solve it. There's contractual legal work. There's engineering to engineer out risks. There's different ways. And we try to challenge ourselves to think outside the box and bring creative solutions that are well beyond insurance to help our clients mitigate risk and thus give them peace of mind that they can focus on their core business and not be focused on managing insurance.
Mm-hmm. That makes so much sense. And it's also kind and generous and caring. It's another version of caring, is like, what might it feel like for them to have this expense and feel like, they get nothing for it, but then you're like, no, here's part of what you get for it. And then you're also looking at it more holistically, right? From like how can you mitigate risks in general? Having insurance is like the safety plan.
No, it's just really helping them understand, that what their coverage is and what they're not, what's not, so that they feel comfortable and they have that peace of mind.
An example that we see a lot, like when we go in order to represent somebody, we have to really understand their organization well. And something we do that's unique is we interview people throughout the organization. So take a trucking company, for instance, we're going to start with the owners and executives and understand all the same questions you asked us. That's how we're starting conversations with an insurance client around culture and how they treat people. It actually translates to business risk. And so we like to understand at the highest level what their view on it is. And then we want to interview the truck drivers, the dispatch, the mechanics, all the way down the line. And we're looking for thread throughs. Does it exist the way they believe it does? And if it does, often what we find is that their internal culture and their actual brand aren't aligned. Maybe they have an Instagram that has some representation of their culture, but usually not even that. So we have teams of people, like Mia leads the charge, where we create content, we interview their people, we overhaul their Indeed pages, their Glassdoor, because we want their actual culture to live and breathe externally. And most of it doesn't.
We're doing that with our video production team. So in the interviews, we're videoing it and then putting it together in something that's consumable.
So what we're trying to actually do is, what we do is our business model at C3. We're trying to help our clients do that exact same thing. And, just one client at a time, say, hey, if you treat people this way and you have an effective way of telling that story, it actually reduces your risk. You hire better aligned people, you have less turnover, you have less lawsuits, they're more efficient. The whole organization runs better that way. So we're using ourselves sort of as our own poster child and then saying, we'll help you take it to the next level as well. But it all just gets back to people and relationships and culture.
That's incredible. Right. And it's hard work, but you've seen the results of it. So now that you've test driven this philosophy or this principle, and you've seen all of the dividends, including what you're talking about right now, you're saying, well, I want everyone to experience this. And here's how I'm packaging it. And you're giving your clients examples as almost case studies for people to recognize the value, and that it comes in all different shapes and sizes, because you're not telling them what they should care about. You're helping them figure out what they care about and what their values are, and then how everything can be consistent.
Yeah, and people ask us, like, what, how did we win, best places to work? Where we started out with winning it in San Diego, and then it became, nationwide. We got in the top 10 in the nation, and people ask us how we did it, and it's really simple. It's just really just caring about your people and, putting people first, and then that ends up becoming, a huge driver in growth.
For sure. Yes, we had Michael Bush on ROG. It was a 2-part series. Amazing. He's the CEO of Great Place to Work. And one of the things he taught us is that a common denominator for all companies who win Great Place to Work is psychological safety. And you're talking about psychological safety. You're not calling it that, but, a place where you can be vulnerable and authentic and talk about your mistakes and your addictions or your issues or your challenges, and be heard and loved and cared for and supported. I mean, that is psychological safety at its finest. And that when, and then Amy Edmondson was also on ROG, and, she's like the author of Psychological Safety, and most recently Right Kind of Wrong, about how the science of failing well is a subtitle of her book. And then she talks about how really psychological safety is at the root of all high performance teams. And, organizations are just collections of high performance teams. So I think, what you're talking about and what you're modeling is so key to just having an effective business, treating people well, of course, and feeling good about that. That's why your generosity exudes so brightly. But then seeing and there's a great ROI for that ROG.
I can't believe I'm even about to say this, but in my safety degree, one of the only things I really remember and took away and apply to this day is Maslow's hierarchy of needs. And even every kid's sports team I coached, the parents who were on multiple teams, they're like, we're just waiting for the Maslows, to come through. But it's so true that you have to have that foundation set to, ascend up.
Yeah, you see that in high performing sports teams, right? And we see that even in our kids' sports teams. Like, we can get to a place where, both Jamie and I have got the privilege to coach our own kids in different sports. But you can take a group of kids that are just not great. They're just not great at the sport, and they can make them really, really great when they feel built, when you build them up over time. And they can, and we've watched it so many times, and it's so much fun to see. And that's really the stuff that we get to see here at C3 is, the same type of thing.
Totally. What if you can think of one of the techniques that you use with your children's sports teams to enable that sense of belonging and team, what would it be?
Well, one that I do that's fun is like the gratitude feast, where we just, this has nothing to do with the sports. And Jamie has a lot of good ones too, but this one is where everybody kind of sits around in a circle and just says, one either nice thing or something that they really like about the person to the right. And the person just has to say, the only thing they can say is thank you. And you just go around a room, around the circle. And by the end, everybody's feeling just really good about their teammates and about what, how much they care about each other. And so that's just a really small thing.
A great one.
That the kids really lean into. And then that helps on the field because now they start trusting each other and support each other.
Yeah.
Well, I do the gratitude feast too. We call it Indian Circle, but the primary one we do is around breath work and cold water immersion. And so, the breath work is Wim Hof's. We do part Wim Hof's, which I call just forced air. And then we teach them how to box breathe. Instead of doing the 4 count that military does, I make it 5 because when I throw them in 40-degree water, it's easier for me to count on 5 cycles than 4 cycles. But, we're teaching them the power of breath work. And most kids we can get from the initial way we start, before we do a body scan or anything, we have them just hold their breath and we time it. And so we hold a clock up and we have them sit up and look at, what their time is. Most people are less than 30 seconds when they start. And the last thing we do before we go in the cold tank is we do it 2 more times back to back. And most kids, we get somewhere between 1 to 2 minutes through that.
Whoa.
So that's the power of oxygen. Like if you're doing proper breathing, you can physically perform better. So we help them connect to that. But then we introduce trauma, which is 40-degree cold water, and throw them in a cold water tank where they got to practice it. Because you can't simulate, a championship game on the line and be like, okay, in the middle of this game, let's start doing breath work. So the cold water is that trauma, because when you go in, especially if you're 10, you lose your breath and you just hyperventilate. So you kind of have to figure out how to use it to get through trauma. So that's my favorite one to do. And I've probably put over 200 kids in, and I think 1 didn't complete it in the entire, every team I've ever coached.
That is so satisfying, because talk about return on generosity. You have no idea what those 200 human beings, well, you do a couple of them, but for all of those people, you don't know what they're going to do with the rest of their lives. You're going to lose touch with a lot of them, but you taught them a skill that they will have for the rest of their lives through all of the hardships ahead, because that's what life is, right? The ups and downs. And you've given them a tool, a skill. You've shown them how beneficial this is. Like, I often think, like, I can't imagine how much better my life would be if I learned that at 10.
Me too.
I had,
Me
right?
too. Yeah.
And I had these tools, but we have them now, and we're paying it forward. Thanks for sharing that. Those are some good practical things that we could do with our own teams and our own, groups.
And we
So,
do both of those things with our groups. I think coaching kids is one of the best leadership things you can do.
yeah.
All the things, Gibbs referencing that we do a bunch more. We do them with our own teams here. And it is powerful to do together as adults.
Actually, for me, it was like, I played soccer all my life, and I still pretend to play a couple days a week. But probably the most satisfying part of the game has been coaching. And I love playing the game, but coaching is more satisfying.
So before we wrap, if you don't mind, we could do some rapid fire questions. Are you up for that?
Let's do it.
Sounds good.
Okay. So I'd like to hear both of your responses to these. So the first one is, what's one underrated leadership skill you think more people should develop?
I mean, for me, this one's easy. It's listening. I think that's probably listening is probably active listening is probably the most underrated skill.
I love that answer. Since he gave that, I'll go with developing calm and chaos. Like, all the war movies, the hero at the end is the one who was calm in the chaos. And I think that's an underrated leadership trait.
Yes. Amazing. And it goes back to the tools that you were just talking about, right? Like equipping yourself with how do I respond when this stressful situation comes my way, and stay calm, because then you can be level-headed and make better decisions. Wonderful. What's one mistake you've learned from the most in your career?
I think for me, it's probably, not having the difficult conversations early. When I look back, it's, as I've been developing as a leader, that there's that pull between being liked versus having a difficult conversation. And that's something that I've really worked on myself.
So what's your go-to strategy when navigating high stakes negotiations?
I mean, for me, it's probably, a lot of preparation if I have time to prepare. So just doing a lot of learning and understanding before I go into the high stake negotiation, and then really being open and flexible once I'm in it, so that I really am able to, get to a place of that we want to get to and maybe it's something that I didn't even think of.
A lot of the success that Gabe and I have, whether it's client facing or internally, he's really talking about having the most knowledge in a negotiation is the power of a negotiation, but we use curiosity to get to a place of having the most. So if we're able to prepare in advance, of course, we're going to do that to the max. But a lot of times in what we're doing, we have zero time to prepare. So having an open-minded and using curiosity to find different rabbit holes to go down and get to a place of knowledge before we reveal our cards or play the hand is key. We frequently see less mature salespeople playing a hand without a level of knowledge or understanding who they're playing against before doing so.
Yeah, and the listening part is going to be key, right? Because sometimes you can just sit there in a high stake negotiation and wait for them to play their hand.
Yeah, but instead you're listening, you're curious, you're asking questions, you're genuinely wondering, what makes them tick or what are their biggest challenges. And it sounds like you do that too with your client intake and how you learn about how they operate and what they care about. So that listening and curiosity partnership is so essential. So if C3 Insurance had a mascot, and you might already, but if you don't, what would it be?
If I was given like an actual animal as a mascot, most are animals, I would say like an eagle, representing America, freedom, business, prosperity. That in an animal representation, and we're very close with a bunch of military organizations, so it thread throughs to our give back strategy as well.
Right. Yeah. Eagle is perfect for you both and your organization. What do you do for fun?
I still play soccer, as I mentioned. I love to ski and snowboard. I love going out for runs in the canyon. I love
Very
spending
active.
lots of, going on vacation with the family is a lot of fun.
Yeah, I'd say all the same things. I probably spend most of my fun time watching my kids play sports. If we can shed the kids for a moment, just going out with my wife, or I mean, we love to travel too. So traveling anywhere outside of your comfort zone, doesn't even have to be outside of America, but I mean, we do love international travel where you're being exposed to people, cultures, things that you don't get on a normal everyday basis.
So what's the most dad thing that you have said while coaching your kids? Because both of you are very invested in your children and you're coaching your kids. What's a dad thing that you've said?
I mean, my kids get a lot of dad jokes from me. But they're like
king of the dad jokes.
They're spur of the moment. They're usually really bad puns in the moment, and my kids just roll their eyes all the time. But every once in a while, I get a little tiny smirk smile, which is really satisfying.
That's a win. Yes, I love that.
That's so funny. I mean, I like the joking answers on it. He's the king of dad jokes, so it all comes from him. When I coach my kids' teams, I try to coach my own kids as little as possible, so we're trading off with the other coaches. But my trick on trying to get my kids to do what I want is by having them articulate their own goals and then helping them reverse engineer what does that mean to accomplish, and then asking them, do they want to commit to that? So probably something to do with Maslow's hierarchy of needs, or a lot of our teams, we dissect different, 7 habits of highly effective people, things like that. I always put a book theme to something. So I'm usually asking my kids if they're holding themselves accountable back to like whatever commitment they made to themselves.
Wise. That's a good one. Yes. Well, thank you for sharing your philosophies and the ways that you run C3 and how you work together and what you care about as examples of what generosity looks like in the workplace and in life. And I'm deeply grateful for you taking time to share that with us.
Well, thanks for inviting us. We're grateful to be here.
Thanks so much. Yeah, it was really fun to be on and enjoyed the conversation. Look forward to having you on our podcast.
All right. Me too.
Thanks for listening to ROG Return on Generosity podcast. Please help us grow by subscribing and reviewing us on your favorite podcast player. And for more information, visit bridgebetween.com. We grow when we give.
우리는 나누면서 성숙합니다.
We grow when we give.
On rayonne quand on donne.
We grow when we give.